The morning was perfect. Sunlight, silence. Nothing seemed wrong. But when Keanu Reeves reached for his car door, a scream shattered the calm. "Don't get in the car." A little boy ran barefoot across the street, crying, pointing. "There's a bomb under your seat. I saw a man plant it." Where are you watching from? Because what happened next was no accident. Wires, a blinking red light, seconds from detonation, and the man behind it. He wasn't a stranger. He was someone Keanu once called brother. The morning sun painted Greenhaven Meadows in gentle gold, casting long shadows between the modest homes that lined this quiet suburban street. Songbirds filled the crisp air with their cheerful melodies, while a soft breeze rustled through ancient oak trees that had witnessed decades of peaceful mornings just like this one. Children's bicycles rested against white picket fences, and the scent of fresh coffee drifted from kitchen windows where families were just beginning their day. This was the kind of neighborhood where nothing extraordinary ever happened, where the most exciting event might be a lost cat or a friendly dispute over lawn boundaries. In this picture of tranquil domesticity, a figure emerged from a small rental house that looked no different from any other on the block. Keanu Reeves, now 60 years old with silver threading through his dark hair, stepped onto the front porch with the same understated grace that had defined his decades in Hollywood. He wore simple jeans and a plain black t-shirt, carrying himself with the quiet dignity of a man who had learned that true strength rarely needs to announce itself. There were no bodyguards flanking him, no entourage of assistants, no gleaming luxury vehicles waiting at the curb. He had chosen this modest Airbnb precisely because it offered him something his fame rarely allowed: normalcy. The actor stretched in the morning air, his weathered hands reaching toward the sky as he took a deep breath of the clean suburban atmosphere. Today held special significance for him. In just a few hours, he would stand before hundreds of supporters at the Hope for Kids charity gala, where he planned to announce his $5 million donation to help disadvantaged children across the country. It was money that could change countless young lives, providing education, healthcare, and opportunities that might otherwise remain forever out of reach. This wasn't a publicity stunt or a tax write-off. It was simply Keanu being Keanu, using his success to lift others up, just as he had done quietly and consistently throughout his career. He walked toward his rental car, a modest sedan that perfectly matched his low-key approach to life. The vehicle was nothing special, just reliable transportation that wouldn't draw unwanted attention or make him feel separated from the everyday people he genuinely cared about. As he reached for the door handle, his mind was focused on the speech he would give later, the words he hoped would inspire others to join him in making a difference for children who needed it most. That's when the world exploded into chaos. A small voice pierced the morning stillness like a fire alarm, sharp and desperate and filled with terror that no 7-year-old should ever have to feel. "Don't get in the car, it's dangerous. Please don't get in." The words came in a rush, accompanied by the sound of small feet pounding across asphalt as a little boy burst from the house directly across the street. Ethan Carter's face was streaked with tears, his small chest heaving as he ran toward Keanu with an urgency that made every adult instinct scream that something was terribly, horribly wrong. The boy's eyes were wide with fear, his hands shaking as he pointed frantically at the innocent-looking sedan. "There's a man, he put something under your seat. I saw him this morning when it was still dark. He had a hood and he was doing something bad to your car." Keanu froze, his hand still gripping the door handle as the child's words hit him like a physical blow. For a moment, time seemed suspended, the peaceful morning sounds continuing around them as if the universe hadn't just tilted on its axis. Then training kicked in, the same survival instincts that had carried him through countless action scenes, and he slowly stepped back from the vehicle. "Show me what you saw," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the ice water now flowing through his veins. Ethan, still crying but determined to be brave, pointed underneath the driver's seat. He crawled under there, and he put something with wires and a little red light that blinks. Keanu dropped to his knees beside the car, his heart hammering against his ribs as he peered into the shadows beneath the seat. There, nestled against the metal framework, was a device that didn't belong. Wires snaked around a small metal box, and sure enough, a tiny red LED pulsed like an electronic heartbeat, waiting for the right moment to deliver death, his hands trembling slightly. Keanu pulled out his phone and dialed the emergency number his security team had drilled into him years ago. Within minutes, the quiet street was transformed into a crime scene. Black SUVs appeared as if from nowhere, disgorging serious-faced men and women who immediately began establishing a perimeter around the house and car. The bomb disposal unit arrived with their specialized equipment, their movements precise and methodical as they approached the deadly device. "Motion activated," the lead technician reported, his voice muffled by his protective gear. "The moment you sat down and shifted your weight, it would have triggered." This wasn't meant to be a warning or a scare tactic. Someone wanted you dead. The words hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Keanu found himself looking down at Ethan, this small boy who had somehow seen what adults had missed, who had found the courage to run across the street and scream at a stranger to save his life. The child was still shaking, still crying, but there was something else in his eyes now. Relief that he had been heard, that he had been believed. "You saved my life," Keanu whispered, kneeling down to meet Ethan at eye level. "How did you know to watch? What made you stay awake?" But even as he asked the question, a darker realization was beginning to take shape in his mind. This wasn't random. This wasn't some deranged fan or opportunistic criminal. The timing was too perfect, the placement too professional. Someone had studied his habits, learned his schedule, and planned this assassination with cold precision. As his security team pulled surveillance footage from nearby cameras, one grainy image began to tell a story that chilled Keanu to the bone. A figure in a dark hoodie, face obscured but body language unmistakably familiar. The way the man held his shoulders, the particular rhythm of his walk, the subtle favor of his left leg over his right. Keanu had seen this silhouette 1,000 times during late-night editing sessions and contentious meetings about script changes. Nathan Cole. The name whispered itself through his memory like a ghost returning to haunt the living. A film producer who had once been his friend, his collaborator, his trusted partner in creating stories that mattered. Until the day Keanu had discovered the financial irregularities, the missing funds that were supposed to go to crew salaries and community programs, until the moment he had made the hardest decision of his professional life and exposed Nathan's betrayal to the authorities. The lawsuit that followed had been brutal and public. Nathan had lost everything. His reputation, his company, his marriage, his future in Hollywood. The man who had once commanded respect in boardrooms across Los Angeles was now persona non grata, his name associated with scandal and fraud. And apparently, he blamed Keanu for his fall from grace. But as Keanu stood in that suburban street, watching bomb disposal experts carefully extract the device that would have ended his life, one question burned brighter than all the others. How had a 7-year-old boy named Ethan Carter, known to watch for danger, how had this child, who should have been sleeping peacefully in his bed, been awake and alert at exactly the right moment to witness an assassination attempt in progress? The morning sun continued to shine down on Greenhaven Meadows, but the peace of this quiet neighborhood had been shattered forever. And somewhere in the shadows, Nathan Cole was still out there, his thirst for revenge apparently far from satisfied. The security footage played on loop in the temporary command center that had been established in the Greenhaven Meadows Community Center, its grainy black and white images revealing a truth that cut deeper than any physical wound ever could. Keanu sat in silence, his hands clasped tightly together as he watched the hooded figure move with practiced stealth around his rental car. The timestamp showing 3:47 in the morning when the rest of the world slept peacefully. Each frame brought back memories he had tried to bury, faces he had hoped never to see again, and decisions that had seemed so clear cut 15 years ago, but now felt heavy with unintended consequences. Nathan Cole had been more than just a business partner back then. He had been a friend, someone Keanu had trusted with his career, his creative vision, and his reputation. They had spent countless hours together in editing bays and conference rooms, crafting stories that mattered, films that could inspire and entertain in equal measure. Nathan had been brilliant at his job, possessed of a sharp mind for both the artistic and commercial aspects of filmmaking that made him invaluable in an industry where both elements rarely coexisted successfully. But brilliance, Keanu had learned, could be corrupted by desperation and greed. The discovery of Nathan's betrayal had come accidentally, through a misfiled email that revealed negotiations with a rival studio. Secret meetings where Nathan had attempted to sell exclusive script treatments and insider information for substantial financial gain. The evidence had been damning and undeniable. A paper trail of deceit that showed Nathan had been systematically undermining their projects while maintaining the facade of loyal partnership. The confrontation had been devastating for both men. Nathan had broken down completely, admitting to gambling debts that had spiraled out of control, to financial pressures that had driven him to acts he claimed to despise. He had begged for understanding, for a second chance, for the opportunity to make things right without involving lawyers or industry executives. But the damage had already been done. The breach of trust so fundamental that Keanu had seen no alternative but to report the violations to the proper authorities. The legal proceedings that followed had been swift and merciless. Nathan lost his production company, his industry standing, and his financial security in a matter of months. His wife had filed for divorce, taking their young daughter with her and securing a restraining order that prevented Nathan from having any meaningful contact with the child he adored. The man who had once commanded respect in Hollywood's most exclusive circles found himself persona non grata, unemployable and financially ruined, watching his entire world collapse while the entertainment media dissected every detail of his downfall. Prison records confirmed what Keanu had feared to learn. Nathan had served 7 years of a 10-year sentence for fraud and embezzlement before being released 8 months ago on good behavior. Surveillance footage from local businesses showed him in the Greenhaven Meadows area for weeks prior to the bombing attempt, studying patterns, learning schedules, and planning what would have been the perfect revenge. The man who had lost everything because of Keanu's moral stand had decided that the only justice worth pursuing was the permanent kind. Across the street from where this revelation was unfolding, a different kind of story was taking shape in a modest 2-bedroom house that had seen better days. Lena Carter moved through her small kitchen with the efficient grace of someone who had learned to make the most of limited resources, preparing breakfast for her son while mentally calculating whether she could afford to pick up an extra shift at the hospital later that week. Her scrubs hung neatly on a chair by the door, ready for another night of caring for patients who needed her steady hands and compassionate heart more than they would ever know. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, his small hands wrapped around a mug of hot chocolate that was more milk than cocoa, his eyes still wide with the magnitude of what had happened that morning. He had always been a quiet child, thoughtful beyond his years in the way that children who grow up fast often are. Since his father's death in the industrial accident 2 years earlier, Ethan had become his mother's silent protector, watching over her in ways that no 7-year-old should have to, carrying burdens that belong to adults. The boy's habit of sitting by his bedroom window had developed gradually, born from a combination of loneliness and an instinctive need to keep watch over their small corner of the world. During the long hours when his mother worked night shifts at the hospital, Ethan would position himself at the glass, drawing pictures of the neighborhood, memorizing the patterns of who belonged and who didn't, developing an unconscious awareness of the rhythms that kept their community safe. It was from this perch that he had first noticed the strange man in the hooded sweatshirt, moving too carefully, too deliberately through the pre-dawn darkness. Something about the figure's behavior had triggered Ethan's protective instincts, the same intuition that made him double-check the door locks and leave lights on for his mother's return. He had watched the man work beneath the car, had seen the small electronic device being carefully positioned, and had understood with a child's clarity that something terrible was about to happen. When Keanu knocked on their door that afternoon, Lena's first instinct was to apologize, to worry that her son had somehow caused trouble for the famous man who had been staying across the street. She had recognized him immediately, of course, but had respected his obvious desire for privacy by maintaining a polite distance. Now, faced with his presence in her living room, she found herself wringing her hands and wondering if Ethan's dramatic intervention that morning had somehow crossed a line. "I'm so sorry if he bothered you," she began, but Keanu raised a gentle hand to stop her words before they could continue down that path of unnecessary guilt. "Ma'am, your son saved my life," he said simply, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "If he hadn't been brave enough to run across that street and warn me, I wouldn't be standing here right now. There are no words adequate to express what that means to me, what his courage has given me." Ethan emerged from his bedroom slowly, still uncertain whether he had done the right thing, still carrying the fear that he might have made a mistake that would bring consequences down on his family. Keanu knelt to meet the boy at eye level, recognizing in those young features the same quiet strength that had driven him to act when action was needed most. "Are you angry with me?" Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible in the small room. Angry, Keanu's response was immediate and filled with warmth. "Son, you're a hero. You saw danger and you acted to protect someone, even though you didn't know me, even though it would have been easier to stay quiet. That takes the kind of courage that most adults never find." In the days that followed, Keanu's gratitude took forms that went far beyond words. Working through his financial advisors and lawyers, he quietly arranged for the mortgage on the Carter house to be paid in full, the deed transferred clear and free to Lena's name. An anonymous donation appeared in their bank account, enough to provide security without being so large as to create suspicion or discomfort. A reliable used car materialized in their driveway, accompanied by paperwork showing that all registration and insurance fees had been handled by a charitable foundation that existed solely to help working families in need. Most significantly, Keanu established an educational trust fund in Ethan's name, designed to grow over the years and provide for college expenses when the time came. He wanted to ensure that the boy who had saved his life would never be held back by financial limitations, that his natural intelligence and moral courage would have every opportunity to flourish. The plan to honor Ethan at the Hope for Kids charity gala was meant to be a quiet recognition, a moment to acknowledge genuine heroism without overwhelming a child who was still processing the magnitude of what had happened. But despite Keanu's best efforts to control the narrative, word of the dramatic rescue had begun to leak out through social media channels that seemed to have eyes and ears everywhere. Someone had captured cell phone footage of the moment when Ethan had run across the street, his small voice cutting through the morning air with desperate urgency. The video was grainy and distant, but the emotion was unmistakable. The raw terror of a child who had seen death approaching and had found the courage to stand in its way. Within hours of being posted, the clip had been shared thousands of times, accompanied by increasingly elaborate theories about what had really happened in Greenhaven Meadows that morning. The hashtag #LittleHeroEthan began trending across multiple platforms, as strangers from around the world found themselves moved by the story of a 7-year-old boy who had saved a beloved actor's life. News outlets picked up the story, adding their own speculation and commentary to the growing mythology surrounding the incident. What had been intended as a private moment of gratitude was rapidly becoming a public phenomenon that neither Keanu nor the Carter family had anticipated or wanted. As Keanu watched the story spiral beyond his control, he found himself confronting a familiar irony. In trying to protect Ethan's privacy, he had inadvertently created the kind of media frenzy that could overwhelm a child's normal life completely. The same fame that had made him a target for Nathan Cole's revenge was now threatening to disrupt the quiet existence of the very person who had saved him from that fate. The challenge now was finding a way to honor Ethan's heroism while protecting his childhood, to express genuine gratitude without creating a burden that no 7-year-old should have to carry. The days leading up to the Hope for Kids charity gala carried a weight that extended far beyond the usual pre-event preparations. Keanu found himself moving through a world that felt fundamentally altered, where every shadow could conceal danger and every moment of normalcy felt like a gift he had almost lost. The bomb disposal team's words echoed in his mind during quiet moments. The clinical assessment that he had been mere seconds away from death, saved only by the vigilance of a 7-year-old boy who had possessed the courage to act when action mattered most. Despite the trauma of the assassination attempt, or perhaps because of it, Keanu felt more determined than ever to attend the gala and honor his commitment to the children who needed hope. The $5 million donation had been planned for months, but now it carried additional meaning, a celebration of life itself and the unexpected ways that ordinary people create extraordinary moments. He spent hours crafting his speech, not the polished remarks that his publicists had originally prepared, but something deeper and more personal, words that came from the raw honesty that near-death experiences can unlock. The message he wanted to share had crystallized in his mind with startling clarity. In a world increasingly divided by fame, wealth, and social status, true heroism remained remarkably democratic. It didn't require red carpets or movie contracts or millions of followers on social media. It simply required the willingness to do what was right when doing right was difficult, dangerous, or inconvenient. Ethan Carter had embodied this principle without even understanding its significance, acting from pure instinct and moral courage that most adults spent lifetimes trying to cultivate. Across town, in the modest Carter household, preparations were taking on a different character entirely. Lena had initially resisted Keanu's invitation for Ethan to attend the gala, her protective instincts warning her that such exposure could overwhelm her son and potentially expose their family to unwanted scrutiny. She had seen how quickly the story had spread across social media, watched strangers dissecting their lives and creating narratives that bore little resemblance to their actual experiences. But as she observed Ethan in the days following the incident, she began to recognize something important happening within her quiet son. The boy who had always carried himself with the careful reserve of someone who had learned too young that the world could be unpredictable and harsh was beginning to stand a little straighter, speak a little louder, and smile with genuine pride when people praised his actions. For the first time since his father's death, Ethan seemed to understand that he had agency in the world, that his choices and actions could matter in ways that extended beyond their small family circle. The transformation became complete when the small navy blue suit arrived at their door, perfectly tailored to Ethan's measurements, along with a note from Keanu expressing how honored he would be to have such a courageous young man stand beside him at the gala. Ethan had stared at himself in the mirror for long minutes, adjusting the tie with serious concentration. And Lena had seen in his reflection not just her little boy, but glimpses of the man he might one day become. The Beverly Hills Marriott had been transformed into a wonderland of lights and flowers for the Hope for Kids Gala, its grand ballroom filled with Hollywood luminaries, philanthropists, and advocates who had gathered to support disadvantaged children across the country. The atmosphere was one of elegant celebration, punctuated by the gentle hum of conversation and the soft musical accompaniment that provided a sophisticated backdrop for the evening's proceedings. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables decorated with white roses and flickering candles, creating an environment that felt both luxurious and intimate. When Keanu took the stage, the room fell into respectful silence, hundreds of faces turning toward him with the attention that his presence always commanded. But tonight, something was different about his bearing, a depth of emotion that went beyond his usual gracious public persona. He stood quietly for a moment, allowing the weight of recent events to settle in his chest before beginning to speak. 3 days ago, I learned something profound about courage, he began, his voice carrying easily through the sound system to every corner of the room. I learned that it doesn't announce itself with fanfare or demand recognition for its efforts. Real courage often comes in small packages, speaks with quiet voices, and acts without expecting reward or acknowledgement. The audience listened with growing intensity as Keanu recounted the events of that morning in Greenhaven Meadows, his words painting a picture of ordinary heroism that resonated deeply with people who had spent their careers creating and consuming stories about larger-than-life protagonists. Here was something different, something authentic and immediate that reminded everyone present why they had originally been drawn to the power of narrative to inspire and uplift. Tonight, I want you to meet someone very special, Keanu continued, gesturing toward the side of the stage where Ethan waited with his mother. His small frame dwarfed by the magnificent surroundings, but his posture straight and proud. This young man did something that many adults would find difficult. He saw danger approaching a stranger and chose to act, even though it would have been easier to stay silent, even though he had no obligation to get involved. As Ethan walked across the stage to join Keanu, the applause began slowly and then built to a thunderous crescendo that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. The boy's face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and pride, his eyes wide as he took in the sea of faces all focused on him with genuine admiration and respect. Keanu placed a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder, a gesture that spoke volumes about the bond that had formed between them through shared experience and mutual respect. "Ethan Carter saved my life," Keanu said simply, his words cutting through the applause to reach every person in the room. But more than that, he reminded me of something I had forgotten in the complexity of adult life. Courage doesn't require fame or fortune or special training. It just requires a willingness to do what's right when doing right matters most. The $5 million donation announcement that followed felt almost secondary to the human story that had preceded it, though the commitment drew its own wave of appreciation from an audience that understood the significance of such generosity. But the real power of the moment lay in the image of the famous actor and the 7-year-old boy standing together on stage, connected not by celebrity or publicity, but by the fundamental human experiences of gratitude and courage that transcend all artificial boundaries. As the evening wound down and the guests began to filter out into the Los Angeles night, Keanu and Ethan found themselves sharing a quiet moment in the limousine that would take the Carter family home. For Ethan, this was his first experience with such luxury. His eyes wide as he explored the leather seats and marveled at the mini refrigerator stocked with sodas and snacks. But more important than the novelty of the experience was the easy companionship that had developed between the unlikely pair. "Do you think I'm really a hero?" Ethan asked softly, his voice barely audible over the hum of the engine as they glided through the city streets. Keanu considered the question seriously, understanding that his answer would become part of how this young boy understood himself and his place in the world. "You know what I think?" he replied eventually. "I think heroism isn't something you are. It's something you do. And what you did that morning was absolutely heroic." The news that Nathan Cole had been arrested came as the limousine pulled up to the Carter house. A phone call from Keanu's security team confirming that the manhunt had ended successfully. The former producer had been found in a motel 40 miles outside the city, apparently planning additional attacks that would never now come to fruition. Justice would follow its course through the legal system, but for Keanu, the most important resolution had already taken place on a stage in Beverly Hills, in the form of a 7-year-old boy who had shown him that the best parts of humanity often come in the smallest, most unexpected packages. As Ethan walked toward his front door, still wearing his navy blue suit and carrying himself with newfound confidence, Keanu understood that their story together was really just beginning. The bond forged in crisis had evolved into something deeper and more lasting, a connection between two people who had learned that courage and gratitude could bridge any gap, no matter how wide the distance between their worlds might appear to be. The story of Keanu Reeves and Ethan Carter reminds us that courage can emerge from the smallest among us, and that gratitude has the power to transform lives in ways we never imagined possible. Ethan didn't just save a Hollywood star that morning. He showed us all that doing the right thing, no matter how small it might seem, can create miracles that ripple far beyond what we can see. Here's what I believe with all my heart. Listen to your instincts when they whisper that something isn't right. Cherish the people around you, even the ones you've never met, because you never know when your actions might be the difference between life and death. True heroism doesn't wear a cape or demand recognition. It simply shows up when it's needed most. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey today. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, please hit that like button, subscribe to Motivation for Success, and share in the comments what lesson you're taking away from Ethan's brave choice. Where are you watching from tonight? I'd love to hear from you.